began at 2:30 in the morning, with Tyler's division leading the way down the Warrenton Pike from Centerville. Brigadier General Robert Schneck's 2nd Brigade leads the marching column, followed close behind by Colonel William Sherman's 3rd Brigade. These two brigades had spent the night between Centerville and Cub Run. Colonel Erasmus D. Keyes' 1st Brigade, further east at Centerville, had begun its march at 2 in the morning, but soon fell behind the rest of the division. The moonless night was very dark, and progress is excruciatingly slow for the soldiers. At about 5 in the morning, after nearly 3 hours of marching, the lead columns of Tyler's division arrive at their designated halting points just before the stone bridge. The lead unit in the column consists of the 2nd Section of Company G, 1st U.S. Artillery, led by Lieutenant Peter C. Haynes. The lieutenant's gun section consists of a single 30-pounder Parrott rifle he nicknamed Long Tom, which is unlimbered and ready for firing within 10 minutes of arrival. Haynes' gun is soon joined by the other unlimbering batteries of Captain James A. Carlist and Romain B. Ayres. At 5:15 that morning, Haynes' 30-pounder Long Tom fires a barrage of 3 shots aimed across Bull Run toward the Confederate positions at Portici Mansion. The other 2 batteries soon join in the firing. It is the opening salvo of the battle. After firing the battle's opening shots, Long Tom continues streaming shells across Bull Run as part of Tyler's diversion maneuver. One of these rounds ends up crashing through the roof of Wilmer McLean's house as Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard is eating breakfast. This violent interruption to his meal quickly alerted the Army of the Potomac commander that the battle was on, and sooner than he had hoped. Beauregard begins to fall into McDowell's trap, riding out to alert his brigades to focus their efforts on the Federal activity at the Stone Bridge. The only Confederate unit posted in the immediate vicinity of the Stone Bridge is Colonel Nathan G. Shanks' Evans' 7th Brigade. This small, half-sized brigade consists of the 1st Louisiana Special Infantry Battalion, led by Major Chatham Roberto Wheat, and the 4th South Carolina Infantry Regiment under Colonel John B. E. Sloan. When General Schneck begins deploying skirmishers from his brigade to probe the Stone Bridge and Bull Run, Evans responds by dispatching 3 skirmisher companies from his brigade to meet the threat. Evans' skirmishers soon become engaged in a firefight with Federal troops of the 1st and 2nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiments, along with the 2nd New York State Militia. Colonel Evans also brings up his 2 6-pounder howitzers from Lieutenant George S. Davidson's section of the Lynchburg, Virginia Artillery, deploying them beneath Van Pelt Hill, but not the Stone Bridge. From about 6 to 8:45, Evans and Schneck's skirmishers exchange fire with one another along the Stone Bridge and Bull Run. McDowell's feint maneuver is playing out perfectly, as the rebels are taking his bait. During this time, most of the brigades from Hunter's and Heintzelman's divisions were near Sudley Ford, and would soon be crossing to turn the Confederate left flank. As these events transpire, Brigadier General Joseph Johnson's Army of the Shenandoah begins to arrive on the field from Manassas Junction. He orders his 2nd and 3rd Brigades under Colonel Francis S. Bartow and Brigadier General Bernard E. B., along with the unassigned Hampton Legion, toward the Confederate left flank at about 7 a.m. Brigadier General Thomas J. Jackson's 1st Brigade is held in reserve southeast of Flat Branch, roughly 1 mile southwest of Mitchell's Ford. From there, Jackson can support either Colonel Cox's 5th Brigade behind Lewis's Ford or Brigadier General Bonham's 1st Brigade at Mitchell's Ford. At about 8:45 in the morning, Captain Edward Porter Alexander, General Beauregard's chief signal officer stationed on Signal Hill, 8 miles southwest of the fighting, spots dust rising from the roads in the distance, along with the glitter of bayonets in the sunlight. In the first use of wig-wag semaphore signaling in combat, Captain Alexander signals to Colonel Evans the message, "Look out for your left, your position is turned." Leaving his skirmisher companies along the Stone Bridge and Bull Run to watch for movement from Tyler's division, Evans hastily leads the remainder of his brigade, around 900 men, west on the Warrenton Turnpike. He stops at the intersection with the Manassas-Sudley Road, where he sets up his command on Buck Hill, close to a building known as the Stone House. At 9:15, the skirmisher companies leading the column of Colonel Ambrose E. Burnside's 2nd Brigade of Hunter's division come under fire from Evans' small brigade. The skirmishers quickly move off the road and deploy into line to the east on top of Matthews Hill. With his forces now committed, Colonel Burnside deploys his lead regiment, the 2nd Rhode Island under Colonel John S. Slocum, atop Matthews Hill at 9:30 in the morning. This regiment is quickly joined by the 6th 14-pounder James Rifle of Captain William H. Reynolds, 2nd Rhode Island Artillery Company. From 9:30 to 10:15, the two sides of Matthews and Buck Hill settle down into a steady exchange of musket fire. As the 2nd Rhode Island begins to steadily push back Evans's men, Major Wheat's 1st Louisiana Battalion fixes bayonets, draws their bowie knives, and charges across a wheat field to their front, intending to storm the Rhode Islanders' positions on Matthews Hill. This tactic worked well for Major Wheat when he had put down the peasant revolts in South America, but would prove deadly to his men that day. At 10:15, Wheat's battalion is driven back in its charge, having failed to reach the Federal lines due to heavy musket fire and canister shells from Reynolds' battery. However, as the Louisiana Tigers are making their way back towards their original positions on Buck Hill, they begin to take friendly fire from the 4th South Carolina. A cluster of trees separated the 4th South Carolina from Wheat's men, making communication difficult. When the Tigers had charged, the South Carolinians were unaware of their plan. Seeing the blue and red uniformed troops rushing back down Matthews Hill, the 4th South Carolina had panicked and opened fire. It took several minutes for Major Wheat and Colonel Sloan to restore order to their ranks. The Confederates are not the only ones confused by the meeting engagement. Realizing that he needs to reinforce 2nd Rhode Island, Colonel Hunter orders up Colonel Andrews Porter's 1st Brigade, leaving the rest of Burnside's unemployed regiments to squander precious minutes standing idly by the side of the road. Assuming he would follow Burnside's brigade into the fight, Porter deploys behind his comrades' reserve regiments. This confuses deployment and wastes 30 minutes while the 2nd Rhode Island suffers serious losses confronting Evans's brigade of 900 Southerners. Before the pair of Union brigades can go into the fight, Colonel David Hunter falls with a serious neck wound and quits the field, turning his command over to Burnside. At 10:30, Burnside orders his brigade forward. Unfortunately for the Federals, he does so in a piecemeal fashion. The gray-uniformed 2nd New Hampshire advances on the west side of the road, where it does nothing to provide assistance to the embattled 2nd Rhode Island. The 71st New York State Militia takes too long to get ready, which prompts Burnside to bring up his 1st Rhode Island and send that into the fight. The 2nd Rhode Island shifts further east, leaving a space between it and Reynolds' battery for its sister regiment to occupy. As the Federals are redeploying on Matthews Hill at 10:45, they spot dust clouds off in the distance further south of the intersection, near the Henry House Hill. These were the Confederate reinforcements of B's and Bartow's brigades, both deployed about 150 yards north of the Henry House. Once in line, the men are ordered to load their muskets and await further orders. B also brings up Captain John D. Bowden's 4-gun battery of 6-pounders from the Staunton, Virginian artillery in support. The guns drop tail in front of and between the two brigades as General B exclaims, "Here's the battlefield, and we are in for it." From 10:45 to 11:15 in the morning, the Confederates on Buck Hill begin to aggressively control and confront Burnside's Federal thrust. Riding over to the 4th Alabama under Colonel Egbert Jones, General B shouts, "Up, Alabamians!" and leads them forward into the fight. Down Henry House Hill they ran, and then up the steep slope of Buck Hill, all while under the fire of Reynolds' battery. As Evans' men cheer the arrival of the Alabamians, B deploys the 4th Alabama in the woods formerly occupied by Wheat's men on the right side of the 4th South Carolina. To their front is a cornfield, and beyond it is the smoke pouring from the muskets of the Federals deployed on Matthews Hill. Colonel Egbert Jones ordered his men to lie down and protect themselves as much as possible. Realizing that the Alabamians are insufficient to stem the Federal advance, B orders up the remainder of his command. Some of the officers give short remarks to calm the nerves of their inexperienced men. The 8th Georgia and 2nd Mississippi, together with 2 additional companies of the 11th Mississippi, move down the hill towards the Warrenton Turnpike. The 7th Georgia of Bartow's brigade does not advance to Matthews Hill, instead occupying a reserve position in the turnpike in front of the Robinson House, east of the Henry House. The Confederate defense on Buck Hill now numbers some 3,300 men strong. With B's brigade deploying on Matthews Hill, Evans deploys his own battered brigade further west to meet the Federal advance from Dogan's Ridge. However, the battle is moving in the Union's favor, as more troops from Porter's brigade, along with the lead elements of Heintzelman's division, move up to reinforce Burnside's brigade. Heintzelman's lead brigades from their lines and begin pushing back against the outflanked Confederates. With his element of surprise lost, General McDowell orders forward Tyler's division from the Stone Bridge, pushing past Evans's skirmish companies and moving west on the Warrenton Turnpike to outflank the Confederates on the right. By 11:15 in the morning, the Confederate brigades on Buck Hill are outnumbered 3-1. In a desperate attempt to break the Federal lines on Matthews Hill, General B goes against his better judgment and orders the 4th Alabama to charge up the hill. The 4th Alabama's charge ends in a similar manner as Wheat's charge an hour earlier. Subjected to heavy musket volleys from the 1st and 2nd Rhode Island and canister shells from Reynolds Battery, the 4th Alabama's ranks become shaken and they are completely routed off of Matthews Hill. Colonel Jones himself is among the wounded and dying. As the artillery batteries of Captain James B. Ricketts and Captain Charles Griffin deploy on Dogan's Ridge to the west, they pour a hail of shells and round shot on the rebels. From 11:30 to 11:45, the badly beaten Confederate brigades on Buck Hill begin a mass retreat further south. The retreat turned into a rout as mobs of Confederate soldiers begin running for their lives towards Henry House Hill to the south. Captain Imboden's battery of the Staunton artillery provides covering fire for the Confederate retreat. By 11:45 in the morning phase of the battle was over. The fight on Matthews Hill has ended in a Federal victory. As the Confederates fighting on Matthews Hill began a mass retreat to the south in a panicked rout, Brigadier General Thomas Jackson's Virginian Brigade arrives on Henry House Hill, below the Warrenton Turnpike intersection. Seeing the Confederate retreat, Jackson determines to make a stand with his brigade on the Henry House Hill. He deploys the Virginians in a line of battle from the Manassas-Sudley Road to the west to the Robinson House further east. An additional unit, the Hampton Legion under Colonel Wade Hampton, deploys to the east of Jackson's brigade in the fenced farmland of Robinson's home, aptly named the Robinson Lane. At 11:45 a.m., the Federals on Matthews Hill begin sweeping through the remnants of B's, Bartow's, and Evans' brigades. Colonel David Hunter's adjutant, Lieutenant William Averill, begins assuming control over troop movements for the division. As the rebels stream further south toward the Henry House, Averill orders forward the regiments of Porter's brigade in pursuit. The 27th New York State Militia leads the advance, followed by the 8th New York State Militia and the 14th Brooklyn. As the 27th New York clears the Warrenton Turnpike and begins moving up the slopes of the Henry House Hill, it comes under fire from Hampton's Legion at Robinson's Lane. The 27th New York wheels left to meet this threat, but is soon subject to flanking fire by the 7th Georgia Bartow's brigade, having been left relatively intact from their earlier fight on Matthews Hill. Initially, the 27th New York holds its fire, believing the Georgians are friendly troops of the gray-uniformed 8th New York State Militia, which is supposed to be moving up on their flank. As they soon spot the rebel flag unfurling in the 7th Georgia's lines, it is already too late. The 27th New York absorbs a devastating musket volley by the 7th Georgia and slowly begins to fall back down to the pike under fire from two sides. Moving up to reinforce the 27th New York, the 8th New York State Militia and 14th Brooklyn begin to fire into the flank of the 7th Georgia and slowly advance upon Hampton's Legion in Robinson Lane. The bruising fight with the Hampton Legion demoralizes the 8th New York. They soon break, never to reform to any extent afterwards. The 14th Brooklyn, now alone on the field, pulls back to its original position above the road intersection around 12:30. Following this, Keyes' brigade makes a second failed assault up the eastern slope of Henry House Hill and is repulsed by Hampton's men in the Robinson Lane. After seeing two piecemeal assaults repulsed, McDowell makes a fatal decision. He will hold his brigades back until his entire army is massed for an assault on the hill. Hampton's legionnaires have brought valuable time for the Confederates on Henry House Hill. Meanwhile, General Jackson's busy at work deploying his brigade into line. Jackson's artillery batteries, totaling 13 guns, is ordered to deploy in the reverse slope of the hill. In this position, the Confederate gunners can fire their 6-pounder howitzers, recoil back behind the hill crest, and safely reload before pushing their cannons forward again. At this point, General Beauregard and General Johnson have arrived on the field and coordinate with Jackson to help shore up his lines with the retreating Confederates from Matthews Hill. While Beauregard rallies the remains of B's, Bartow's, and Evans' brigades, Johnson is really rallying the other brigades further southeast. He orders Bonham and Cox's brigades to withdraw from their defensive positions along Bull Run and reinforce the lines at Henry House Hill. After an hour of preparations, McDowell finally orders forward his army at 1 p.m. McDowell makes another critical decision in his plan, where he orders Captain Ricketts and Captain Griffin's batteries to move off Dogan's Ridge and spearhead the attack on Henry House Hill, with minimal infantry support. Ricketts' 6th 10-pounder Parrott rifles of Company I, 1st U.S. Artillery, are the first to arrive on Henry House Hill, and they unlimbered to the west of the house. Griffin's 5 10-pounder rifled guns from Company D, 5th U.S. Artillery, soon join him, unlimbering to the east of Henry House. For the next half hour, a bitter artillery duel ensues between Ricketts and Griffin's batteries against the 13 Confederate guns on the other side of the hill. They are only 800 yards apart. For once, the Confederate artillery holds the advantage, as their smooth-bore cannons are better suited for close-range fire in contrast to the Federal long-range rifled guns. Federal infantry moves up to support Ricketts and Griffin's batteries at 1:30. Guarding Ricketts' guns are the Fire Zouaves of the 11th New York and the red-shirted soldiers of the 1st Minnesota. On the other side of Henry House, the 1st U.S. Marine Battalion and 38th New York move up to protect Griffin's battery. Musket fire zips across the hill as two sides battle it out on the hill. During the fight, Confederate sharpshooters position themselves around the Henry house. Inside, elderly 85-year-old widow Judith Carter Henry is forced to endure the shelling from her bedroom, unable to move due to being bedridden. As Ricketts' battery begins losing men to the sharpshooters, he moves one of his guns to face the house, firing a shell at the wooden structure. The round crashes through the bedroom, blowing off Mrs. Henry's feet before exploding. Mrs. Henry has just become the Civil War's first civilian casualty. With his men retreating through Jackson's lines, General B informs General Jackson that the enemy is beating them back. Jackson replies then, "Sir, we will give them the bayonet." General B proceeds to move forward his shattered brigade and shouts, "Look, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. Let us determine to die here today, and we will conquer. Rally behind the Virginians." No one knows exactly what General B actually said, as he was killed during the fight on Henry House Hill. However, regardless of what he did say, General Jackson earns the immortal nickname of Stonewall. For the next hour, heavy musket and artillery fire sweeps across Henry House Hill. By 2 o'clock, most of the gunners in Ricketts' battery have been killed, forcing the infantrymen to assist him. Ricketts himself is soon wounded by rifle fire. Meanwhile, Captain Griffin spots an opportunity to attack Jackson's line and outflank him, and sends a section of his artillery to the west of Ricketts' battery, aiming directly down Jackson's position. As the two guns are preparing to engage, they become engaged by Colonel Arthur Cummings' 33rd Virginia. Just before Griffin can give the order to open fire, Major William F. Berry, McDowell's chief of artillery, rides up and tells them to hold fire. The 33rd Virginian are wearing blue uniforms, and Berry mistakes them for friendly forces. Griffin argues with Berry that they are Confederates, but Berry pulls rank and has the guns hold their fire. When the 33rd Virginian's flag unfurls, it is too late. They fire a tremendous volley into the artillerymen before charging, taking the guns. This is a turning point of the battle. At that moment, Lieutenant Colonel Jeb Stewart's 1st Virginian Cavalry charges across the field and smashes into Ricketts' battery, forcing back the 1st Minnesota and 11th New York. The U.S. Marine Battalion, guarding the majority of Griffin's guns with the 38th New York, is also routed from the field after taking heavy casualties. Ricketts' battery is abandoned, but soon reclaimed by the 14th Brooklyn, which moves up to retake both Ricketts' battery and Griffin's 2 guns. The red-legged devils of the 14th Brooklyn stand firm against Jackson's men, but are eventually repulsed after taking flanking fire from the 6th North Carolina and companies of the 49th Virginia and 11th Mississippi. The Confederates charged the guns, retaking Griffin's section for the second time. At this point, General Jackson orders his men to yell like furies. The 4th and 27th Virginia regiments surge forward with a tremendous shout. It is the first use of the infamous rebel yell. The 2 regiments charge across the field and capture Ricketts' and Griffin's batteries after becoming locked in a deadly bayonet fight with the 14th Brooklyn. Remnants of the 11th New York, the 38th New York, and the newly arrived 1st Michigan. From 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, Colonel William B. Franklin's brigade, namely the 5th and 11th Massachusetts, desperately attempt to take back the guns on Ricketts' battery, and each time are repulsed by the Confederate defenders. McDowell's piecemeal attacks are failing. Around 3:30, he brings up Colonel William Sherman's 3rd Brigade with the 13th New York, attempting to regain control over Griffin's battery. The 13th New York becomes engaged in bayonet fight with the 2nd and 5th Virginian regiments before being driven back with heavy casualties. At the same time, the remnants of the 4th Alabama and 7th Georgia charge the 5th and 11th Massachusetts at Ricketts' guns, driving them back. At 3:45, the gray uniformed troops of the 2nd Wisconsin and Sherman's Brigade, along with the Irishmen of the 69th New York State Militia and Scots of the 79th New York State Militia, surge forward up Henry House Hill in support of their battered comrades from the 13th New York. Sherman's brigade manages to recapture Ricketts and Griffin's guns and set up a line along the Henry House. However, they soon become subject to heavy flanking fire from Jackson's brigade, now reinforced by Colonel Cox's brigade. During the shootout, Colonel Wade Hampton is wounded, and Colonel James Cameron of the 79th New York is killed while leading his troops behind the Henry House. The Irish are faring no better, as Colonel Michael Corcoran is captured during a charge by the 8th Virginians of Cox's brigade. The 8th Virginians surge across the field, Hampton's Legion and the 18th Virginians in support, recapturing Ricketts and Griffin's batteries from the shaken regiment of Sherman's brigade and driving the Federals off Henry House Hill for the 4th time that afternoon. While most of his brigades are now used up in his assaults on Henry House Hill, McDowell's last hope depends on Colonel Oliver O. Howard's 3rd Brigade of Heintzmann's division, which is brought up the rear of the Federal column. Exhausted from hours of marching, Howard's troops arrive on the field at 4 p.m. They move into position west of the road on Chin Ridge, where they are met by Confederate reinforcements of Bonham and Early's brigades, along with regiments of Brigadier General Edmund Kirby Smith's 4th Brigade of Johnston's army. This includes the Confederate 1st Maryland Battalion, which rushes the Union lines in support of the 2nd South Carolina. By 4:30, Howard's men are in full retreat. At 5 p.m., the battle was ending as Federal troops began retreating from Henry House Hill in a panicked rout. In their way are civilians from Washington, who were picnicked out on the fields beyond the battle. They had arrived expecting to watch a decisive Union victory, but were now joining in the frenzied panic. Troops are streaming rearward, and McDowell's army of northeastern Virginia is falling apart. Confederate battle flags proudly wave over Ricketts and Griffin's captured batteries on Henry House Hill as routed Union forces and panicked civilians stream across Bull Run in droves and frenzied mobs. By 6 p.m., General Beauregard has called off his pursuit of McDowell's broken army. His forces are just as equally exhausted and shaken after 12 hours of battle. The First Battle of Bull Run, or Battle of First Manassas as it was known in the South, is over. At the time, it is the bloodiest battle in American history, with over 3,000 casualties littering the field at the end of the day. What many had believed would be the decisive battle to end the war now only proved to serve as the beginning of the conflict. Americans had finally awoken to the fact that this would be a long and bloody war.